Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our Autodesk Forma webinar. We're very excited to have Brianna Grimm here from Autodesk to walk us through the ins and outs of Forma. And we wanted to thank the AIA for hosting us today. And if you have any continuing education questions, anything like that, you can send those in the questions box or the chat box. We do have Hillary here who will be answering those questions. Okay, Brianna, go ahead to that next slide for me.
All right.
All right, so just some housekeeping here that for everybody, just as we get started here. So all attendee lines will be muted throughout the presentation. Please do send us your AIA number and actually your name as well in the chat, because sometimes the display name is a little bit different. So go ahead and send your AIA number and your name in the chat sooner than later. People forget at the end and it's a mad dash. So please go ahead and send those as soon as possible so that we can go ahead and give you those continuing education credits. Also send us your questions throughout the presentation in that questions box or chat box. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna be waiting for the most part till the end to answer those questions. So do go ahead and send those as they come up. And at the end, we'll have a Q&A section where we'll go down that list. The webinar will be recorded. If you're registered for this webinar, you will see that recording in your email, typically an hour or two after the presentation. And it will actually be on our YouTube page later on as well. Any questions, concerns, anything of that nature, you can go ahead and give us a call here at 305-445-6480 or email us at info@dbscad.com. All right, one more slide over.
Oh, did you have another one, Alan, before I jumped in?
No. Okay. That's it. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and transfer it over to Bree. And yeah, go ahead and take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alan. So today we are going to talk about Autodesk Forma. Just a little bit about what I want to cover here is an introduction of myself and kind of my qualifications as it relates to kind of Forma and the Autodesk ecosystem as a whole, as well as I'm an AIA member like most of you on this call too. And then we're going to talk about Forma, our kind of grander vision here at Autodesk. Then we're going to move into Forma as the product as it exists today, how you guys can get access, and then we'll spend the majority of the time on a live demo. So hopefully that's pretty fun for everybody to see how quickly you can start to use this right now in your own practice. And then like Alan said, we are going to save questions for the end. I'll kind of prompt questions as we go, as we move from segment to segment, but we will certainly do kind of like a live Q&A at the very end. So my name is Brianna Grimm. Please feel free to call me Bree. I am currently a technical solutions executive at Autodesk, and what that means is I work with thousands of customers all over the world. I get to talk with them about kind of how they're currently working, any sort of pain points, big goals for their firms, and I help kind of aid and make sure that they find value in their Autodesk solutions and the ways they're working right now. As an architect myself, I know what it's like to be in a firm and you just simply don't know what you don't know. It's kind of hard to keep up with the updates. So I'm here to make that a little easier for you. I am based in Denver, Colorado. I went to Kansas State University. If there's any folks from Kansas or know Kansas on the line, I am licensed in this state. And even though I work at Autodesk, I truly want to stay involved with the profession. So I'm volunteer with NCARB, and I just do a lot of outreach, I would say, particularly for architects. So I certainly invite any of you to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can scan that code or simply search and find me later. I just love to help and answer any questions that you might have. And with that, we will just jump into Autodesk Forma. Starting with our vision here. The vision really comes down to the way that we currently work. So on this diagram, you kind of see the little kind of jump steps and loss of data. If you think about how we work, it's all about files. We might start in a SketchUp file for our early stage design, then move into Revit, and then any other products you might lose along the way. And every time you're doing that, you're exporting something out to a different file type to import it somewhere else, and there's just inevitably a data loss. And the desired state for us here at Autodesk and really everyone in the industry is to not experience that data loss. Have this continual flow of data, of geometry across the entire project lifecycle. You know, we might be architects and think we're primarily focused on that planning and design, but we know that what we create has value when it comes to the construction and even the operation of that building. So the less data we can lose earlier on, the better. And so Forma, as it exists today, it is primarily, I like to call it a AI cloud-based SketchUp, but it is primarily focused on early stage building design in the planning stage. So before we even get into Revit. And so you'll notice that this is a cloud-based platform. What I mean by that is we're going to access it through my internet browser. Like I'm just on Google Chrome. I didn't have to download anything. It's a collaborative platform. Multiple people can be in there designing. Once again, I don't have to download anything. And because of that, it's also file agnostic or file-less. You know, nothing really exists in this state. And that's part of what we get from being on a cloud platform. At Autodesk, we're trying to make an industry cloud for the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, as well as design and manufacturing and the media and entertainment industries that we serve. And all of those are built on a data repository. So instead of, once again, going to these individual files, it's more about bits of data and how we can transfer them between our own software and even third-party software. I do like to tell folks at Autodesk, I think we're trying to start to play better with others. So it doesn't necessarily have to be our own software. You'll see in Forma that there's a huge ecosystem that we can connect to of like third-party products like Rhino. So we'll make sure we get into that today. Now, this first iteration of Forma, so what is it as a product? I like to use this very simple equation. If any of you are familiar with Autodesk Forma, it was like our direct SketchUp competitor. And then in 2020, Autodesk acquired a company called Spacemaker. They're based out in Oslo, Norway, and they're very good at the AI-based design layout of buildings and the building-to-building relationship. And so we're taking their capabilities, mixing them with the Forma kind of massing capabilities, and that's where we get Autodesk Forma today. So if you ever get confused and hear Forma it and Forma, not going crazy, they technically are two different things, and we're trying to build one greater platform with all of it. And then I like to break Forma down into its capabilities into these three buckets. And we're going to very clearly go through these three buckets in the live demo today. The first one is contextual design. And I think this is a huge highlight. It's been, I did a lot of SketchUp work before I came to Autodesk. It can be pretty difficult to get all of the context that we need into our model, let alone being able to transition or migrate that into Revit. And so with Forma, you can get free topography, property boundaries, roads, and context buildings. And then we can bring all of that once again into Revit. So we'll talk about that bucket. The second bucket is conceptual design, or schematic design, as I like to call it. It's the ability to create a lot of different design options quickly. We'll even look at some of the generative design capabilities that are built into that platform, and just start to mass something up, and then we can, once again, migrate it to Revit or to any other third-party tools that we currently have connected in Forma. And then this third bucket is called design analysis. This is where we're calling it outcome-based design comes in. The fact that we can make our design decisions really early based on real-time data. Because everything that we're going to build in Forma is based on an address, we can actually pull in climate data, sun, wind, noise from the site, and make design decisions based on what we're seeing, and doing it in this free form where we can create a series of different options before Revit is asking for, you know, the constraints. It's just much more free-form tool. And then lastly, I will be able to show us here about how it transitions into Revit if we have time at the end. I just wanted to share a quick chart of everything we do in Forma will be thin-lined, so it doesn't have thickness. But when we do transition it into Revit, it will take on thickness. And so these are just those Revit families that it by default assumes. So walls become the basic exterior wall. It'll put in a floor, a roof. The parking can even come over. And then the site will be a topo solid. And it's also going to group together all vegetation and general buildings around the site that we put in. Okay, and then the last piece too is access. So I just wanted you to know how to get there before we start the demo. If anyone wants to follow along, feel free to do so if you've already played around with it yourself, or just simply so you know how you can do this. If you or your firm has the AEC collection, Autodesk Forma is included in that collection. So most folks out in the US, I would say, most firms I talk to have this collection and have access to it and just simply don't know it. And so what you're going to do if you have that collection is you can, once again, follow along with me. You can go to manage.autodesk.com. In the All Products and Services tab, you can search the word Forma. It'll look like this little thumbnail I have on there, and you just click Access. It'll bring you to your own hub. A hub can contain multiple projects. You can make a hub for just yourself, or if you want to, call the hub the name of your firm and invite your whole firm there, you can do that too. That's a little bit about how we're going to get started. And with that, we are going to jump into the deep end here and do the demo. All right, I think that looks good on our end. As we're transitioning to, if you guys have any questions at this point from the vision, kind of switching from this idea of files to data, drop those questions in the chat. We'll get to them at the end. Any questions about how to access or the product as a whole, drop those into the chat as well, and we'll get to them. All righty, so this is going to be a live demo. I've got a backup if something goes wrong, but also don't judge my design skills. The point of this is mainly just to show you how fast we can do that. This is what your hub will look like when you access Autodesk Forma. We have the option to hit a new project, and what that's going to bring you to is the entire kind of globe of the earth. We can make any projects anywhere in the world. You will notice that the data is better in the US and Europe currently, but as a cloud platform, we're constantly improving it and adding data sources. So I thought since we're talking with DDS CAD and AIA Florida, we're going to go to Florida. You can type in a specific address if you want to. You can type in Crossroads, a city, or you can even just zoom and scroll in, and it will find your site. So we're going to zoom in here. You'll notice that there's now this viewfinder. With that viewfinder, you just need to make sure that's visible in order to confirm our map area over here. If we zoom too far out or too close up, it won't let us actually create that. So we're going to make sure we get a little bit of the water running in there as well as the site. We'll give it a name. And we'll confirm our area. So as this is loading, the first thing it's going to pull in is a piece of topography. The default is from USGS. So once again, these are national sources, that's something that Autodesk makes up. We also have a few other sources like FEMA for the buildings, and a national company called Regrid providing the property boundaries. Each one of those sources has a learn more section if you wanted to read about their tolerances themselves. So we'll give that a second to load there. And what it is pulling up is the library. So we'll take a look at this in just a second. I'm just going to give you a sense for this piece of topography. I know Florida's pretty flat, so not exactly the most interesting topography, but you can see how it's starting to kind of capture that highway bridge. A bit of the topography change in this kind of canal or river here. So it's not totally flat. If for any reason you're not happy with this topography source, you think it's missing something, we can always come back over here to our library and order more data. So we've got a couple other sources. Esri was another one I forgot to mention. But as we come in here, we'll go ahead and take a look at the buildings. We'll do the FEMA ones today. Here's that learn more section if you want to read about the tolerances of any of the data coming in. And so I can pull these little viewfinders to go to whatever area I want to bring in. So maybe I just want the context buildings from this general block over here. I can do that. Hit order, and it's going to bring those in for free. Got a green check mark. We'll come back here, and let's do property boundaries as well. I'll click into here, and you'll see that it remembered where I drew my viewfinder, which is pretty helpful. So I don't have to think again about if I want to do that. I'll hit order. I will call this out because I get this question all the time. You see how it says like $3 and free. Everything on here is currently free. One day I think they might charge if you want to do like a larger area, but the small portion will always be free. Hit order. Okay, and then you'll notice that it doesn't actually bring it into our project space just yet. It's putting it in our library over here. So what you're going to do is hit preview of that source, and it's going to load here. And based on my selection, it found 12 buildings. With a click of a button, I can add all of those, or I could come in and say, hey, I really just want these few buildings. I can hold shift and click those, add them. Now we'll do the same thing, take a peek at the property boundaries. Looks like it found 9. I can add all of those here, and it'll bring them into the space. And so I'll take a moment there. There is more context, right? The roads, we can bring those in as well. But for a lot of folks, you know, this is enough. They're like, this is hard to get information. I'm just, you know, this is all I need out of Forma. I want to send this to Revit. And if that's you, we'll come over here to our navigator where it's started one proposal for us. And with a click of a button, we can hit send to Revit. So this is very key. This is part of that data exchange, right? I'm not exporting, nor am I importing. I'm exchanging data into another platform. And so it will do that seamlessly, and it will do that on a per proposal basis. The one thing to note is you do have to download the add-in one time. When you download this, it's going to add the Forma capabilities into Revit 2022, 2023, and 2024. So one download will cover all 3 of those. We just released Revit 2025 on Tuesday, so I need to double check if it goes in there as well. I haven't had time to do that, but you just do that once, and then every other time, all you have to do is hit send to Revit, and it's going to send it right on over for you. It'll add the Forma tab is under massing and site on the Revit side. Okay, now let's say you do want to go a little bit deeper into Forma. We've kind of covered that contextual design bucket, and now we're going to move into the conceptual design. Where we start with that is all of our tools that you see over here. This is the beginnings of kind of the format functionality coming into Forma. And let's say we're going to develop, this is the site over here where I believe the DDS CAD office is. So I'm gonna come in here and delete that building because instead we're gonna develop that. And what you're gonna do is start by defining the site limit here. That way the analysis knows that we're looking at this specific site on the overall kind of swath of topography. You can build in different zoning if you want to do multiple maybe plots on the site. And then the constraints too is where you would build in your setbacks. Just do the site limit here real quick. Just going to trace the area and hit enter to complete that. So then the next thing is to start to do the massing on top of that. I'm going to go through each of these options. The first one is the Explore tool. This is the beginnings of the generative design, so we will take a look at that. The next is the buildings themselves. This is where the AI part starts to come in. We can do line buildings, which are more module in nature. Basic buildings, which would be drawing a boundary and extruding it up. And then the house is a new feature if we are doing more of like residential townhomes or individual kind of standalone homes, but in a larger development. I can show you how to use this tool. So we're going to start with the in development, and I'm going to do a slightly larger site for this. So I'm going to make one new proposal. At any point in time, I can duplicate an existing one, or I can come over here and just make a brand new one. And you'll see it kind of resets my area. I'm going to do the Explore over here on this large area. I'm going to go all the way up kind of over here and down, hit enter to complete that. And when I draw this area, you're going to see that it automatically starts to generate a series of options. Those options are based on these Explore parameters. So it's willing to look at buildings, vegetation, and roads. So let's say I don't want roads, I could take that out Let's say I don't want linear buildings. I can kind of take that out as an option. If I actually want these to be more, you know, significantly longer, I can do that. And we'll take all these parameters into consideration and generate a series of options that I can click through here. Hopefully it's coming through on the screen, but there's these little dots down here. This is the different pages of options that we can flip through here. And you can go around and sit, you know, until you find something that you like. You know, maybe I like this configuration better. Maybe I want the trees to actually be denser. I can change their spacing. You know, based on the area, these are maybe taller trees as well, maybe more like 30 feet tall. And you'll see how the options here are responding based on the changes to these parameters. So we'll go ahead and stick with this option right there. When I exit out of the Explore tool, it'll take us away from the generative design options and now into the option to treat these as individual structures. Okay, that's about as much as I'll say on the generative design piece there real quick. We'll jump back to our first proposal here, and we'll do more of a standalone building on this plot. I'll undo the basic buildings, and we'll just make something. So you also notice there are not really snaps at this point in time, but I can type in a length. So if I do want this to be exactly 70 feet, I can hit enter and do that, and it's going to hold that to be true. After I draw my first line, it's going to create the snaps. So I'll just do a really basic shape. Come back around and meet that at 90 degrees. Click enter, and then now we get into that extrusion part. So you can make this as, if you are someone who is doing more like multifamily or residential towers or commercial towers, mixed use towers, you know, this can, in a very urban area, you could do that like Miami. We can also still just keep this 1 or 2 stories, whatever you want to type in. I'll just do 40 feet for now, hit enter. And we'll take a look at some of the options we get over here on our building tools. So I can tell this to actually be 6 stories in height. I could tell them to actually be 15 floor to floor, actually come down to 2, whatever you want. If you want to come in here and say, yeah, first floor is good at 15 feet, but that second floor, it should be, oops, not 4 feet, sorry. I meant 12 feet. You can do that, and it's all going to respond to the data you put in here. Taking it a step further is the functions. So that's where a lot of this gross floor area and, you know, floor area ratio, these things are going to be calculated based off of our functions we put in here too. So I'll run through a series of options. We can put parking on any one floor. I'll do that one in a second. And our functions here, they default come with residential and commercial, but you can also come in here and very easily add your own functions. So you can create another one and say we actually need retail. You can change the color as well as what it's going to calculate at what rate. So say create that function. You'll see now it's in my list. So yeah, maybe we have some sort of retail on the first floor, and just above that is something residential. So it'll change those colors. I have noticed you need to refresh your page for the area metrics to update. So we'll do that real quick just so you can see. It's going to be split pretty much 50-50 since we only have 2 floors, but you'll see it'll tell you that square footage dedicated to each function, as well as that percentage split. If I come in here and add a 3rd floor, it's going to continue with that residential, and now you'll see that split, you know, more 2/3, 1/3. So it's going to respond to all of that. Okay, we'll go a step further. I know we got a question before the webinar about interior spaces, so we'll address that here real quick too. Actually, before I do that, I'm just going to point out, see this little handle right there? At any point in time, you can stretch the building, push and pull a single side or a single floor plate. This is part of that kind of massing as well. Okay, now going to the inside of the building is the floor plans option. So when I click on one of these, it's going to bring us into a split viewer where we're looking at the 3D down below and our plan up top. You'll notice there's a few measurements here. We can also change our grid and change our snaps when we're in this view. But everything we do, once again, is going to be single lined. So if our first floor is retail, maybe we have some sort of small lobby space near an entry, I'm not quite sure, and then maybe we have 2 tenants off of that. However we want to split it, and we can come in here and start to assign functions again to the spaces. So maybe these 2 are tenants, so they're going to be different units, and this is our lobby, so more of either a core, probably core in this case. If I also wanted to change something to parking, I can change any of those segments or the whole plate to parking. And what it's going to do is put in those stalls based again on your parameters. So these are set at 8 by 16. We can slide this or type in a different number, and it's going to respond based on the parameters you put in. I'm going to change this back to a unit for now. When I go up a floor, hopefully this comes through once again on the share screen. It's almost like trace paper. It's going to show you the lines from the floor below and give me the option to trace them. So let's say I wanted to, on the 2nd and 3rd floor, I can select multiple floors at a time, take my line and add in our core here, and it's going to apply that to all of the floors I have selected, making it very, very easy to draw these floor plans. Once again, no, they're thin lined, but they're going to take on that thickness when we come into Revit. Here, give that a core, and maybe we build a corridor off of this and then do a series of units. And we can come in here again and assign these as units. All right. I'll jump out of the building here real quick. You'll see a lot of those lines are now expressed on the outside, but what it has done is calculated the number of units. So in this residential, we have 8 between those 2 floors. And another thing too is I mentioned the parking on the inside. So that function is basically adding it inside the structure. Like if you're going to do a parking garage multi-level or anything like that, it will react if you draw any interior walls. Like if you want to start to kind of maybe block out some columns in the parking garage, it will respond. But if you're in a situation where you're going to do more of a lot style parking, this is a good time to mention the extension library. So at the beginning in the presentation, we talked about how this is a cloud platform. Autodesk is trying to play well with others. And part of how we do that is with the extension library. So you can build your own extension. That's something we can send information on. And these are examples of all of the pre-built ones. If any of you guys are familiar with Evolve Lab, they're based up here in Boulder. Their AI rendering tool is in here. And so you can add that in. We've got Dynamo, which is Autodesk. We also have, this is another place to download the Revit plugin. We've got the Rhino. And my favorite one is TestFit. So with this one, we're going to take a look at from a parking perspective. All you have to do is hit add and agree. It's going to bring that into your project space. Exit out of here, and I will now have that option in my extension library. All right, give that a second to load. Also, while that's loading, I'll take a moment too to be, if you got any questions, we're kind of in the mix of bucket 2 where we're talking about schematic design. So any questions you have at this point, make sure to drop those in the chat so we can get to them at the end. Okay, so the test fit has loaded. It's giving me my pen tool here. I can come in and start to draw a parking lot. You're seeing that it's responding to kind of whatever shape I tell it to follow. Be as weird as you want, really. Click enter to finish. And we've got an entire parking lot drawn in about 2 seconds. I don't know if anyone on this call had to do this in AutoCAD. I certainly did for a lot of retail work I did when I was in architecture. So this makes it a lot easier. Once again, it is parameter driven. One reason why I like the test fit option more than the one that's inside the structure is our ability to also control ADA spaces. So you can see the buffer here, car width, van width. On the lot itself, the ADA spaces are these ones that are shaded in blue over here. And then you'll also see that we've got an entry. I can come in here and there's another handle where I can start to drag this if we actually want the entry to be somewhere else. Actually, in reality, probably maybe be over here. Okay, and once again, sliders, type in your whatever your desired number is, and it's going to respond there. It's a little bit on the parking. Okay, come back over here to our site with our basic building. A couple of the other things you might want to add when we get into the analysis phase last might be vegetation. There's the ability to add lines. So it's just going to follow my pen here and add a tree line. The parameters for these, oh, there, sorry, is the height, width, and the spacing. So we can once again make them denser, taller, whatever you want. And then those are going to impact like our sun study when we get into that portion on the building. We can also do areas. So if you do know there is a large, maybe wooded area, you can do that over here. And it's going to be asking for a boundary and filling that in once again with our preferences. Okay, a few of the other tools we'll go through is roads and railroads. So these, I would recommend mainly using these if you know there's going to be like a new curb cut and a new road on a site, because all of the existing roads we can pull in from the data sources. Same thing with the railroads. What their purpose currently is in Forma is to inform the noise study. So we can put different decibel limits and busy times of day, and that's what it's going to run the noise analysis off of. We also have generic shapes, volume, surfaces, and lines. The 3D sketch tool, I do like to highlight this because this is more of the intricate 3D modeling. Like if you do any of the Boolean sort of shapes, that's how you're going to get that, is going through this 3D sketch. We can pull measurements off of our site, and we can also label things. The label, in my opinion, is really good for, we're calling it the 3D canvas, but if you want to basically take a screenshot out of Forma and put this into like a feasibility study that you would deliver to a client, you can start to label things and say dimensions or what something might be on an overall site. And on that note, I'm going to go into these bottom tools down here. We can change our snaps in this project space. We can change the way this looks on the terrain. All of these carry over into Revit, by the way. So if I go into the satellite image, we'll give that one a second to load. The satellite image will translate to the realistic view in Revit. Otherwise, it'll be more of this gray map look and like a hidden line view. So if you like that, we can also change our time of year and time of day for the shadows as it relates on our site very easily. And so you might want to go into 2D for some of that. And if you're going to do screenshots for those reports, just know that it's going to take a high resolution screen capture, and we can save our camera position. So if we are doing a series of proposals, kind of like we have one or two, and maybe looking at the same site, we can have that consistency between the camera view as well. I'm going to change it back to maps. There we go. And go back to 3D, and then also at any point in time we can do true north. Okay. Let's do one more proposal real quick because I think we're doing okay on time. And we'll take a look at the homes. Maybe we'll jump over here to more of a residential stretch. Let's say we're going to do this neighborhood. We'll go into the house tool. What it's going to ask you to do is draw a line here of homes, click enter to complete, and now we can come in here and take a look at its parameters. So this is the default. you might want to come in here and edit it just to give you a sense of the options. So I would start at the parcels themselves. So, you know, if we actually want space between the houses, we're going to make sure our parcel is wider than the structure itself. So let's see if I can do like a 50-foot. There we go. Now there's more spacing between them, and maybe they are 60 feet long. So we'll see those parcels change. The houses, we can keep them a little smaller like that. I like round numbers, so we're going to do that. We can change the height of them, you know, if they're actually more like a 3-story townhome, 1-story single family. This is that profile of the roof. If you want to do parapets, and you'll see that it's changing all of the houses together, just like that. When we publish, that's going to change our default setting and then bring that in to our proposal here. And then you'll also see that it's running the square footage together, since these are pretty small homes. And that one is one of the newer features. So that's our options for the buildings there real quick. I'm going to jump back to our first proposal. So on the other side of the canal, and kind of round off here with a few of the other area metrics. We can switch between units. So we'll see that all 10 of our units here fit in a certain category. If we want to change that distribution, we certainly can. If we wanted to look at, you know, 0 to 1,000, 1,000 to 2,000, so on and so forth, we can change the way that it's looking at these. And you'll see our distribution has changed there. We can also look at parking. If I would have left, let me come back in here. Say if I went back and made this to parking, we'll also see that we can now get those parking metrics. So that's about 5,000 square feet of parking I added. And based on that, we can get 10 stalls at 50 square feet per stall. Lots of different metrics that we're once again getting very, very early on, and everything we draw can come into Revit. Okay, doing pretty good on time. Our last segment is going to be the analysis portion. So in Forma, we have the option to do the sun hours, daylight potential, wind, microclimate, operational energy, which is in beta, the noise, which comes off the roads and the railroads, solar energy, which is also in beta, and then the ability to add the extension, whether you create your own or if you want to pull in like one of the shadow studies from the extension library, you can do that as well. So we're going to focus on our first proposal here, and we'll just do a simple sun hour study. Most of the studies in here have 2 options. One is called a rapid analysis, which you'll see is going to be completed usually in about 30 seconds. And there's also a detailed analysis that takes more 30 to 60 minutes. So we would not be running that on a call like this. Just know it is an option for you. So I like to do the 2 extremes. We'll look at June 21st on this site. We'll run the analysis. It knows to look at this kind of reddish site area that we drew at the beginning. And while that loads here, we'll get a green check mark in the top when it's complete. But I do like to point out that view history. So if I have a series of different buildings on this one plot in our different proposals, it'll track every different version that I run the sun analysis on. If I change the time of year, it's going to track all of those. And at any point in time, we can compare these analysis against one another. So before we look at that one, we'll do a second one for our November. Click run. And you'll see that these are completing pretty darn quickly for, you know, we're on a go-to webinar. I'm sharing my screen. I've got my video on, and you can see the performance is still keeping up with me pretty quickly. Okay, so now we'll go into the compare tool. It is also over here on the left. And it's going to know all of your studies you have done per proposal here. So we've got some area metrics and 2 sun studies. I can bring these in and drop them side by side. Oops, must not have read that one. There we go. And we'll see those differences between June and November. As I scroll around, you can see a few of the differences. You can really see the dark shadows here we're getting in November. You know, and this is the kind of things that come back to that outcome-based design. If you're going to create an uncomfortable condition, you know, with wind near an entry, you can reposition your door. In this case, if that is just too much sun on one face, maybe you won't do your windows there. I mean, we conceptually know some of that from school and the analysis that we do on our own, but it's really nice to have this data coming in for us. And every analysis will have its own legend here at the bottom too. And this might be a great spot where you would take a screenshot of this just to put into some sort of report. All right. We'll do another one, and maybe we do it on our second proposal. I like to do the wind studies. So on this one, I do need to come back in here and create a site limit. So it will let me run this study. It goes right there, enter. And we will do the wind this time. This one, you'll kind of see it starting to run that simulation across the series of buildings. With the wind study, it's going to do both comfort and direction throughout the different times of year. This one might take a tad longer. Also, I'm realizing I didn't have Revit open, so I'm going to get that going for us too in the back end. All right. Oops, we want to keep sharing this one. Okay, perfect. Hopefully we're still seeing Forma. There we go. So this one has now completed. We get a sense here, nothing is too uncomfortable. A couple kind of strolling winds here between some of our different closer together buildings. But this will give you that sense of the comfort level. So sitting winds to a little bit slightly stronger, but nothing too uncomfortable here 72% of the time. Then if we switch to the direction, it'll look like it's simulating again here, but we got our wind rows. Don't know if anyone did these in school too, but it's really nice to see that. See, I can see 14% of the time the winds are coming due north, 25% over here east, 12. So all the different times of year, and then the chart below this is that kind of curve for the miles per hour. Okay, and this one actually says the rapid wind analysis doesn't interpret trees for blocking wind, but it will in the detailed analysis. So just a quick differentiator between those two options. Okay, so I won't go through every single one of those analysis, but that gives you a sense of just how quickly this is. You know, we're not even an hour into this webinar and we've created a lot. So just worth noting. So as we transition into the Revit side, what'll probably end up sending proposal, let me go back to our area metrics over here. I think we're gonna send proposal 1 into Revit as our test. And I just think it's worth noting too, I have talked with plenty of folks who are like, this analysis is really powerful in Forma. I already have my building in Revit. Can I send it into Forma to run the analysis? And yes, that is possible if you've got something a little bit more fleshed out. When you send Revit geometry back into Forma, it's going to take the thickness with it, but we can run those analysis. So sorry for my dog. Otherwise, the way this connection works, because we're going to end up hitting send to Revit here, is I can send a proposal once into Revit. I can make any changes that I want in Revit. You know, if I want to add more details like my windows or maybe some sort of like portico or anything like that. And those changes to geometry in Revit can be sent back here to Forma and reanalyzed. But we can't do that back and forth as many times as we want. We can go from Forma to Revit once per proposal, and then multiple times from Revit back to Forma. Okay, hopefully my Revit is loaded now so that we can take a look at it. Okay. Here we go. So I've got Revit 2024 open. For the example I'm doing, I'm just going to do a brand new project to bring that geometry in. Just note if you do this, probably apply your company template so that you've got your standards coming across. We'll get that going. And this might be a gamble. We'll see how the performance goes, but importing a proposal from Forma into Revit, I would say takes about 5 minutes. Hopefully this is followed through. If we come up here to the Massing and Site tab, that is where you're now going to see the Forma buttons. So I'm going to switch to a 3D, so it'll be a tad easier. These real quick. Okay, so load proposal. When I click that button, it's going to remember the last proposal from the last project that I just opened. So you can see the name, proposal 1, our little thumbnail. There's a couple options if there's some things you don't want to bring over. We'll keep it as is and we'll hit load. It's going to run through about 6 steps, can take 5 minutes. So I think what I'll do, Alan, is I'm assuming we have some questions at this point. So maybe we start looking at some of those while it's loading on the Revit side.
Absolutely. Let's do that.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. So kind of going along with what you're doing or what you were just talking about, are you able to import geometry from Rhino, for example, to Forma?
Yes, absolutely. So I only can't demo that because I don't have Rhino software on my machine. But yes, the same way we're doing this load proposal workflow from Forma to Revit, same logic applies on the Rhino side. And that also made me realize I forgot to mention one other thing too, is we talked about the library at the very beginning when we were bringing in the context. So the buildings, topography and property boundaries and roads. You also have the import option in there. So if you ever need to, like you've got your own file from somewhere else, Forma will bring in object files and most kind of 2D formats as well. You can kind of use Forma as a conduit, really, to push and pull this data between a series of different places. What's another question that we're seeing?
All right, another one here. Can test fit also do multi-level parking garages with ramps?
Not currently. The multi-level is within the structure at the moment. The lot is with test fit.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
You want another one?
Yeah, I'm just go for it. I'm getting this to a smaller region.
All right, perfect. Florida ADA spaces are 12 feet by 5 feet aisles. Is the test fit for parking changeable for any parameters?
Yes. Yes. Oh, well, the parameters that we saw, doesn't hurt to just switch on back there to this side here. So I know we've covered a lot, so I'll just pull these parameters back up. These are what we can change. So I heard it was like a drive aisle, wasn't it? Or maybe it was something different. What was 12 by 5?
12 by 5 feet, yep.
I think that would be probably this. And maybe even that. I'm trying to think. One of these is doing those buffers. Hold on 1 second. Come closer. So I'm assuming this portion right here, with the stripes, is what's 12 by 5. So it's going to take the same like length, or maybe I got that wrong, but yes, you can control those. It's probably the easiest way to answer that. Okay.
They said no, 12-inch wide spaces plus 5-foot aisle.
12 inch. 12 inch.
Or I'm sorry, 12 foot wide, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I guess for the person who answered or asked that question, I'll just come back here. This is what we can change. Your standard stall width and depth, drive aisle, the turn radius. On the ADA side, we've also got the buffer width, which is the striped area, and then the width of those two cars. They're all going to have the same depth over here of 20. Make that a round number. Yeah, that's
Perfect.
probably the best way I can answer that question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Does the parking tool calculate the number of ADA spaces needed?
My gut says I need to look into that one because my guess is it's probably it is doing a percentage. Is it doing it? It should be doing it to the ADA standard. That's a really good question. I'm not 100% sure. I also haven't figured out why it puts like a couple on one area and another in another area, but I'll look into that.
All right, perfect.
Let's do you want to take a
go ahead.
pause here real quick and we'll switch back to the
Yes.
Revit side?
Mhm.
Okay. So real quick, I put on a section box so that we're not looking at that whole piece of topography because that certainly is well beyond what we're going to need. But you can see that has come in as a topo solid. It's picking up our plots into different portions of that topo solid. You can edit terrain in Forma as well as in Revit. So whichever one you're more comfortable with, I would pick that tool because you can always send it back into Forma to run the analysis. I'll show real quick if I move this into a realistic view, we'll see that that satellite imagery is going to come on over. Hopefully, there we go. You can tell it's definitely picking up the default roof system since the roof system is green, but you can absolutely customize all of this too. Since they're coming in as the same wall type, just, note that you can obviously select all instances in an entire project if we want to switch them over to more of one of your standard Revit wall families. One thing I do love is it is recognizing the fact that we have done 3 different stories, and it is bringing in those grid lines as well over here. So we're already set up to go there. All the widths are moving from the thin line that we made in Forma inward on that structure. It does carry over the property boundary as well. And then I'll show, and it's doing grid lines. This is actually probably a tad easier to see in a hidden line view. You can see those grids are coming through. That's all just set up from that geometry we created in Forma. And then these get grouped together, but you'll see in there, these are just generic models. Same thing's going to be true with these models around the side. Okay, and going back to the Forma tools as well in our Massing Insight tab. So the load proposal is how we bring this in from Forma. The update proposal is going to be available if I change something on this geometry itself. And the unlink is if I don't want this to be connected to Forma, I would just break that connection. I would say you'd probably do that once you're kind of solidly into deeper design development and construction drawings. Because if you're at that point, you probably aren't doing those rapid analysis. You might be using insights inside of Revit to be doing that kind of work at that point. And then I'll also hide this wall really quick. The interior walls, I should have put this on my chart as well, but the interior walls are also being picked up as interior instead of exterior. And our parking should be on one side of this building. It might be in there. Oh, I don't know. This one may not have had parking. Anyway, so I'll stop there again. Point is, in less than an hour, it may not have been the most glamorous design in the world, but we were able to pull in all of that free context we were able to start massing a series of different buildings, right? We looked at the generative design tool, we looked at this basic building, we looked at some row houses, and we were able to kind of get a sense of just even their gross floor area, things that your clients are going to care about, you know, what's going to be feasible on a site, including the parking. And then we were even able to get into a bit of the analysis too. And absolutely everything we did transitioned into Revit. This loaded pretty darn fast, probably because it was a smaller model, but and now we have something usable to launch off from in Revit. So starting to see how these data exchanges are really powerful. And we'll do the last 5 minutes for some questions here.
All right, perfect. And just a quick reminder for everybody, if you have not yet sent your AIA number and your name in the chat, please do so, or in the questions box, so that we are able to give you those continuing education credits. Without that info, it's hard to do that. So please go ahead and send those over when you can. Okay, so next question here, is there any plan to offer a Forma desktop app that for firms that wish to retain full custody of their data and or to migrate or to mitigate disruptions to workflows from internet outages?
I don't know if I would be the right person to answer that question confidently. I would say, based on what I know of Autodesk's vision for these industry cloud platforms, I really think cloud is here to stay, and we're trying to get away from the kind of bespoke nature of just like these one-offs that end up on this desktop or that desktop, or information getting lost in people's inboxes or server file structure. So my gut says I don't think there's going to be a Forma desktop, but I would not, what would you say? It's above my pay grade to know for sure what the answer to that is. From a security standpoint, I know that that is something I believe they're working on getting published, like how this is running on the back end. And I did want to point out too, it's collaborative. I might have been one person in here making these proposals today on this webinar, but this is something where we can add multiple people to a project, collaborate on, very similarly to how we kind of work share in Revit even.
Okay, perfect. I think that was all I had here. So
Okay.
yeah, we covered most of them there. So we did
That is
great.
awesome. I tried to do the questions that I commonly get throughout the presentation. So hopefully that was helpful for a lot of folks as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, perfect. So if we can, let's jump back to that PowerPoint. We'll do our last few closing slides.
Let's see, I think this is, nope, that's not the one you want. You want, I think you just want this one. I think I messed that up right at the end.
No worries.
Does that look good? Does that look correct?
That looks perfect. Yep. So
okay.
Thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you to Bree for the awesome presentation. Thank you to the AIA Florida, and specifically to Hillary, for helping us get all of this set up for you all today. And just by the way, for those customers of ours who are on this webinar or who are on this call, that address that Bree was using is actually going to be our new office that we're moving to in the next couple of weeks. So don't send us anything to our old address as of about 2 weeks from now. Let us know if you need our new address. We'll be happy to provide that for you. And again, be on the lookout for future webinars. If you have any needs that we might be able to help fill, be it software, support, training, implementation, all that jazz, go ahead and give us a call at 305-445-6480 or email us at info@ddscad.com. And as I mentioned, because I have had a few people asking, this webinar is being recorded, will be in your email in the next couple hours if you registered. And if not, you can find it on our YouTube channel. Okay. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you all for your time. And thanks, Alan and DDS CAD, as well as AIA Florida. Very cool opportunity. Hope to talk with you all again soon.
Awesome. All right. Thank you all. Bye-bye.